All right, let's answer some of your questions before we wrap this thing up. Where is the tweet? Where is the tweet? Oh, not that tweet. Where is the tweet? Come on. I was referring to a tweet that I found of Kirk Cousins being at the Twins game yesterday, somewhat incognito. Another Tuesday, another day off. It's okay. They only play the Bears this week. They'll be fine, unless they won't be. All right, here's what we got. Dr. J144, same question I asked last week after another week of inept play by the Giants. Why did Ben McAdoo get crushed by media and fans year 2 after a playoff appearance year 1, but everyone thinks Brian Daboll is a genius now? Did the suit get a raw deal when he was fired year 2? I don't know. I don't think McAdoo was ever suited for the job. And I don't know what kind of a pass Daboll is going to get. Now, the Giants need to create the impression of some stability. They've been going through coaches fairly regularly since Tom Coughlin. Daboll was over his skis. Not Daboll. McAdoo was over his skis. But the thing with Daboll, who was coach of the year in 2022, it's almost like 2022 didn't even happen. They got a lot of work to do to turn this thing around. So I think the fact that McAdoo got run out so quickly will give Daboll a little more time. But Giants fans aren't going to put up with a lot. They've got to fix that offensive line. This is not a Daniel Jones issue. This is the offensive line is horrible issue. No one can make it work behind that blocking or lack thereof. Tom Marshall, Arizona, UK, are we witnessing the end of the Patriot way? Well, I think we are. I think we are. I don't know how you come back from what we've seen the last 2 weeks. 38-3, fine. The Cowboys will do that to teams from time to time. They beat the Vikings 40-3 last year, and the Vikings made the playoffs. When they get up 14, 17 points, Micah Parsons pins the ears back, goes after the quarterback, clamps down on the offense, and it gets worse, it gets worse, it gets worse, it gets worse. That one's understandable. The next week, losing at home to the Saints 34-0, combine it to 72-3. It just feels like it's done. It feels like it's over. They still have 12 games left. He's going to have to make the playoffs to change this. Now, will there be some late season spurt once it kind of becomes a given that he won't be back? We're getting close to that point. Robert Kraft hasn't said anything about the situation. Jonathan Kraft hasn't said anything. Bill Belichick was asked whether he's the right person to start over. He hasn't been asked, is he concerned about being fired? You know, one of the realities of covering the Patriots is that the reporters who are in a position to ask questions, they understand if you would ask a question like that, he shuts down. He's worthless to you the rest of the segment. You may as well just end it. Plus, he can get a little pissy and he can hold some grudges potentially if somebody asks him a question he doesn't like. But we're at the point where it's fair to ask, are you concerned you're going to be fired after the season? If they lose this week to the Raiders, it's only going to get worse. They need to win a game to stop this bleeding. But even then, do we think they're going to get to the end of the season and have even a remote chance at getting to the postseason? I mean, they've lost some games that you would have thought they would win. And the teams they've beaten, the Jets, that was one they almost lost. So we'll see what happens this weekend when they go to Las Vegas to take on the Raiders and Mac Jones and Josh McDaniels and all those interconnections between the two franchises. It's a compelling game because it's a huge one for the Patriots, who are done anyway. But the question is, when does it become obvious they're done? And if they lose this one to the Raiders, it becomes even more obvious that they are indeed done. Dr. J144. Can we stop the anyone can do what Purdy is doing stuff? Not you, but others. Dan Orlovsky said Mac Jones could do this in San Francisco. I'll bet Purdy could get benched twice in New England and score 3 points over 2 games too. I don't think Mac is a great quarterback. I thought it was funny last week that Kyle Shanahan chafed at the idea that Brock Purdy is a system quarterback. That's not the same insult as game manager. Brock Purdy is a system quarterback. He runs the Kyle Shanahan system. He's not blessed with the athleticism to run away from the pass rush if the play that's called falls apart. He's a guy who, within the Kyle Shanahan system, can run any play that Shanahan needs him to run, can make any throw that Shanahan needs him to throw. He's a system quarterback who is perfect for Shanahan's system. And they haven't had that. Jimmy Garoppolo, when he could stay healthy, which wasn't nearly as often as it needed to be, and when he wasn't prone to the periodic brain fart that would cause him to do something stupid that once freaked Kyle Shanahan out so badly in the playoffs, they just reverted to a Bob Greasy approach where it was run the ball, run the ball, run the ball in the second half of the NFC divisional round game against the Vikings, and then 8 passes thrown total by Garoppolo in the NFC Championship. So Garoppolo was a system quarterback, but there were flaws in his ability to run the system and flaws in his ability to stay healthy. They now have a guy who can run the system in Purdy. And I think Sam Darnold, if Purdy would get injured, could probably do a good job of it too. But Purdy is exactly what Shanahan has been looking for. And if he hadn't found Purdy, I think that Shanahan would be ready to go try to sign Kirk Cousins. And if Purdy would suffer another serious injury this year, and I hate to even say that because then if he does, oh, you jinxed him. Cousins, I think, is still a possibility, but Shanahan would have to fall out of love with Purdy the same way he fell out of love with Garoppolo, and that's not likely to happen because Purdy has been great. He's an MVP candidate, and the 49ers, to me, are the best team in the NFL, and there's a gap between them and the Eagles at number 2, who are also 5-0. Sean Alvashar, how does George Paton have a job? He helped lead the Dolphins and Vikings decades of irrelevance. Now the Broncos, what other can you be so mediocre and continue to fail upward? Look, Paton was highly coveted for many years with the Vikings, and he always backed off and wasn't ready to go. The opportunity came in Denver. He basically took over. They nudged John Elway out. But for the Nathaniel Hackett disaster, George Paton would still have the same power and influence he had. Of course, the ownership change had something to do with it. Paton has made it clear that he's all in with George Paton. Sean Payton all in with George Paton. But when you look at where the roster is now, and a lot of those guys were brought in by George Paton, I don't know what happens after this season. I don't know. I think there's a chance Sean Payton moves on from George Paton. There's a small chance the Broncos just hit the reset button again, although it would be a significant buyout to move on from Sean Payton with 4 years left. But remember, this is the richest ownership group in the NFL by far. During the time that I have explained the dynamic with Sean Payton and George Paton, they've earned enough money via interest on the cash they have in the bank to pay for the buyout. And that's kind of an exaggeration, but it's also kind of not. Manuel Villa, do you think the Texans draft pick will end up being lower than the Browns pick in light of the weird Deshaun Watson injury situation and better than expected performance by the Texans? I mean, it could happen. Although I think the Browns defense is incredible. The Texans' talent around CJ Stroud is not good enough. The defense isn't good enough. We'll see. We'll see. And who knows how long Deshaun Watson's going to miss. He hasn't practiced yet this week. We'll see if he's able to play Sunday. The 49ers are coming to town, so that's a recipe for 2-3, but they still have a chance, the Browns do, to emerge as the division champions. When that defense is firing on all cylinders, they are very hard to stop. David Mitchell, is there merit to the idea of Atlanta trading for Justin Fields? What would that mean for Desmond Ridder? What is Fields' trade value? They won their last game, the Bears did, and their offense looked good the game before that when their defense collapsed against the Broncos. I don't think you trade Justin Fields just yet. You can always trade him after the season. I think you see how this season goes. They beat the Vikings this weekend. They moved to 2-3, right? 2-3, 2-4, 2-4. Sorry, haven't had their bye yet. 2-4. You get another win, you move to 3-4. I don't have their schedule in front of me, but the offense is starting to click. Remember, post-2011 CBA, reduced offseason workouts, reduced padded practices. It takes offensive line play time to develop. Maybe the Bears' offense is going to keep getting better and better. Maybe those first 3 weeks were the ramping up period. Week 4, offense looked a lot better, even though they lost. Week 5, they managed to get a win that no one expected them to get over the Commanders. And if they would win this week and move to 2-4, maybe it keeps working. Hunter Wallace, a.k.a. at RBR Roughnecks. If Jim Trotter sees his lawsuit through, how long until a trial would start, assuming Trotter wouldn't take a $50 million check to let this go away in the NFL's eyes? Is there legal precedent for delaying a trial as the defendant for so long? that Trotter drops his suit. No, he won't just drop his suit because it's delayed. Eventually, the case will go forward. Eventually, he will get justice. Eventually, there will be a trial, unless the NFL manages to secure a dismissal of the case. Now, what will happen is, and the deadline's coming up, it's been about a month since Trotter filed the lawsuit. The NFL will have to answer the complaint, or more broadly, respond to the complaint. The response to the complaint can be an answer to the charges, one paragraph at a time. If you've seen a civil complaint, it's numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to the end. And in the answer to that complaint, you'll get a response to the allegations, one paragraph at a time. The defendant either admits, denies, or says it doesn't lack the sufficient information to form a belief as to the truth or falsity of the allegation made in that paragraph. I have written hundreds of answers. I have analyzed hundreds of answers. I have written hundreds of complaints. That is one potential next move by the league. They could also try to dismiss the case. They have some ground that they could argue that Jim Trotter's lawsuit fails to state a claim on which relief can be granted. That's the old 12b6 motion. And yes, some of you lawyers out there may get an hour of CLE credit for the fact that I'm talking about this, but they could file a motion to dismiss. And one thing they could try to do, even though Trotter doesn't have an arbitration clause in his contract, they could try to make the argument that they've made in the John Gruden case. And it's a convoluted, twisted application of the NFL's bylaws. But basically, the NFL's bylaws state that if there's any question of conduct detrimental or words to that effect, it's solely within the commissioner's province to resolve any disputes along those lines. Now, I think that involves the teams, not the league's separate broadcasting arm, but it won't surprise me if the league tries something. If they can come up with some argument that they could mount with a straight face to argue that Jim Trotter is required to take the claim to arbitration, even though his contract does not contain an arbitration clause, they'll do it. Because if nothing else, it buys time. Look at Gruden's suit. It's been almost 2 years since he filed suit. It's still hung up in the Nevada appellate system on the question of whether or not the NFL's borderline frivolous argument, in my opinion, for forcing arbitration is going to prevail. The St. Louis case, it was stuck in the court system all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court for multiple years before the ruling came down that the NFL could not escape the court system. See, this is one of the things that I had no idea. Most people who haven't practiced law don't know. Even when you're in law school, you don't quite understand it. Who decides your case has a major impact on whether you win or whether you lose. There are many different judges with many different political ideologies, and the arbitration system, especially if you have set it up so that you are in charge of it, the commissioner is in charge of the league's secret rigged kangaroo court, as I like to call it. They don't want an independent court to examine their business decisions and habits and to force them to give up evidence they'd rather not give up. They want to control it themselves. So if they can come up with a straight-faced argument to push for arbitration, and even if it fails, go to the next level, go to the next level. This one's in federal court, so there's only 2 levels. It would be the district court rejecting the effort to force arbitration, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, 3-judge panel, rejecting the NFL's appeal. Maybe they would file a petition for rehearing en banc, just delay the process, and then eventually what they call the petition for writ of certiorari to the U.S. Supreme Court. Time passes. And wouldn't Roger Goodell love to be gone before this case goes to trial? Wouldn't he love to be retired before this case goes to trial? Well, if he signs his extension, all they got to do is run out the clock until March of 2027, and he'll be off the job by the time the case ever goes to trial or before he ever has to sit for a deposition. But, you know, I think Trotter's got the tiger by the tail here. And I think what will happen is if they do try to get the case dismissed, try to force it to arbitration, whatever, the moment that the discovery process begins to go forward, that's probably the moment they make him an offer he can't refuse financially. And look, it's easy for me to say, don't take it. because we want the curtain to be pulled back and we want Trotter to have a chance to go get the evidence and to take on the NFL, take on Big Shield in open court. But boy, there's a certain number where you can't really fault the guy for saying, sorry, but my ship has come in and I'm going to go buy one of the ships that an oligarch who owns an NFL team can only otherwise afford. Paul Silva, do you see the NFL ever adopting the CFR rule that allows receivers to get a running start? Well, they do get a running start sideways, and we've seen that speed motion from the Dolphins this year, and other teams are starting to emulate it. I don't think they ever do the rule where the guy behind the line of scrimmage can start sprinting forward. I don't think that ever happens. But you know what? If they get to a point where they decide we need more offense, hey, how about that? How about this? Let's let the receivers have a running start so they're more likely to get open. So we're more likely to complete passes, gain yards, score points. That would be a way to do it. Amused to Death 44 on the Christian Watson horse collar. Instead of an automatic touchdown, couldn't they just give them the ball at the 1 yard line, like pass interference in the end zone? That seems fair to me. Well, they had the ball at the 3 anyway. The play ended at the 6. Half the distance was the 3. This one, to me, flows from the fact that the term palpably unfair act appears in the rule book 17 different times. The officials never award a touchdown or points or do anything relying upon the conclusion that someone committed a palpably unfair act. Sims and I were talking about this yesterday. Remember when Mike Tomlin tripped up Jacoby Jones on the sideline of the Thanksgiving game? And the Steelers eventually got punished, like with draft picks or something like that. It should have been a touchdown for a palpably unfair act. Jacoby Jones was going to score. Mike Tomlin wandered into the field of play accidentally. Don't want to easy for him to say. I don't want to relitigate whether or not that was accidental. Should have been a touchdown, palpably unfair act. They never apply it. That's one of the things that drives me crazy about the NFL. And there are many examples of this that are or have been in the rule book. We got a rule that we don't apply. Why don't you apply it? And if you're not going to apply it, why don't you get rid of it? So what could have happened on Monday night, if the NFL was even remotely in the habit of thinking about palpably unfair acts, the argument would be, and this is very simple, the blatant horse collar tackle, which is prohibited for safety reasons, that amounts to a palpably unfair act. It prevented the touchdown. We're going to reward the touchdown. Now, my point is, at a minimum, there needs to be a conversation about whether in the future a horse collar tackle by the last guy with the last chance to tackle a ball carrier headed to the end zone, we're going to award the touchdown, regardless of whether you call it a palpably unfair act. Why not have that conversation? And I poked around a little bit to see what the NFL thinks of that, and I don't think they think very much of it. What I heard was, well, no one's complained about that play. Well, maybe the Packers should complain about that play. If that's the thing that starts the lawnmower, if that's the thing that gets the league to talk about it, maybe the Packers should complain about that play. And then after the game, what did Josh McDaniels do? He praised Marcus Peters for a smart play. But it is a rule that is specifically there for safety reasons. That's what bothers me. If you're serious about player safety and you have somebody deliberately breaking a rule that is there solely for the safety of the players, and he gets praised for it, and it potentially determines the outcome of the game, is that what you want? I don't think it's what the NFL wants if it's genuine in its commitment to player safety. Maybe it is just lip service. Maybe it is just window dressing. Maybe it is just an effort to avoid getting sued. This would seem to me to be something the NFL should at least talk about if the NFL's desire to promote health and safety of players isn't fugazi. David Mitchell, in an October 1 Jacksonville versus New Orleans game, Disney Plus used chips in player uniforms, so the animation was identical to real life. Why isn't this the standard? Could be used to adjudicate offsides or DJ Moore out of bounds. Look, this is an old argument, and it's a great example of the fact that the technology exists. Remember the old $6 million man? We have the technology. We can rebuild him. They have the technology to completely reimagine the officiating function from the ground up. No more chain the length of 10 yards with 2 sticks. You don't need that. You can put chips everywhere. You can track everything. inbounds, out of bounds, first down, not. And this falls into the same bucket as full-time officiating. The question isn't just, are they willing to spend the money? The question is, are they willing to take the time to do it right? That's the other side of it. You got a bunch of people on salary who would be the ones who have to take on this new project. And you know what? When your job is going very smoothly, your hours of the day go by in a pleasant way, you like what you're doing, are you really looking for more stuff to do? That's the other side of this. It's not just cheap, it's lazy. The people at the league office who would be responsible for revamping, reimagining, reconfiguring the officiating function in all respects to fully embrace the digital age, they don't want to do it. They don't want to be bothered with it. That's as reasonable an explanation as they're too cheap. You put them both together, and we're going to stick with what we've always done. And I don't see it changing anytime soon. Dean Ficini, let me start over again. I think the odds of Belichick leaving New England are increasing all the time, but what I don't know is who would come in and replace him as head coach. Also, if Belichick does go, do you think Tom Brady would be asked by Kraft to join the organization in some capacity? Not if his purchase of 5 or 10% of the Raiders goes through. It sure isn't going to happen. Now, it might not go through. There was a report last week on that. The fact that you can't give employees equity anymore, that may have derailed whatever structure Mark Davis had in mind. One of the reports was that the 5 to 10% share was at a 70% discount. That might not fly. So if he isn't a part owner of the Raiders, I don't know, maybe he could come in and help with the Patriots. Once Belichick's gone, who knows? And there's a thought that Gerard Mayo is going to take over. I think the problem for Mayo is he's too close to the train wreck. I think when it's time to make a change, they're going to have to start from scratch. One name that was mentioned to me a while ago, Mike Vrabel. Bring Vrabel home. He's never coached with the Patriots. He just played for the Patriots. Now, would the Titans let him go? Maybe it depends upon what the Patriots are offering. But bringing Vrabel back to the Patriots is kind of a fascinating turn if it would happen. But you know what? You got to have the players at the end of the day. And they haven't had a great quarterback since Tom Brady left, and it's not a coincidence. They've struggled ever since, and right now the wheels are coming off. Another one from David Mitchell. If Jacksonville fails to get public funding for a stadium and the Cons move, would St. Louis, London, or some other be the favorite to be the next home? I think they go to London if they would leave Jacksonville. And I think that they're going to get what they're looking for because they're able to work the political angle through the new mayor in lieu of putting the measure on a ballot. And I don't think there's any NFL city where the populace would approve of the expenditure of taxpayer money to subsidize renovations or stadium construction for the billionaires that can afford to go out and buy $500-600 million yachts. And Khan's got one of those big boats too. He can pay for his own stadium renovations. That's the attitude most people would have. And in every NFL city, there's a lot of people who aren't football fans. And they're definitely not fans of giving away money to people that they don't think need it. Why does a billionaire need our money? So it feels like they're going to finesse it without a ballot measure. They're going to get it done, and they're going to stick around Jacksonville. It feels like that's the way it's headed. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.